are important. Not too controversial statement, but the day is young. Our ability to communicate largely depends on them. But words alone only make up half the equation of a message. The better, more attractive half is meaning. Because without meaning, words are like a man with two missing index fingers. Pointless. Without meaning, there's no ability to communicate and really no sense in trying. That is, unless you're in a Thailand 7-Eleven trying to buy deodorant. I think we all can agree that toiletries are the unsung heroes of any trip, domestic or international. To paraphrase Commissioner Gordon, they're our silent guardians, our watchful protectors. They're the heroes we deserve, but not the ones we need. Until we do. Until I did. The year was 2007, and I was in Bangkok during the hot season. Just kidding. Every season is the hot season. With an average temperature of 92 degrees and an average humidity of 82%, losing a toothbrush or a comb is forgivable. Losing deodorant, however, not so much. So there I stood, bot in hand, before the young, Thai-speaking employee. I asked a one-word question in English. Deodorant? And that was about it. Shortest conversation of my life. All the young woman could do was politely smile. A kind response considering some foreigner just walked in, looked her in the face, made a sound, and stood there expecting something for his troubles. Still, I really hoped Plan A had worked. I didn't like Plan B. Plan B, it involved charades, and I don't like charades. But the silence between us wasn't getting any quieter. So, I begrudgingly grabbed an imaginary stick of deodorant from some nearby air and began to apply it first to my right armpit and then my left. I really do hate that the universal language is mime. The young lady put her hands over her mouth and giggled as she hurried out from behind the counter to a nearby aisle. She pointed to 2 columns of deodorants. And this was like looking at a restroom sign at a seafood restaurant. Starfish or seashells. I decided trying to mime male wasn't in my best interest. Because whatever the smell came from that little deodorant stick, it was a guaranteed upgrade. Plus, spending the night in a Thai jail didn't sound like much fun. I've heard it's even worse than charades. I wish words and their meaning were only problematic when traveling abroad, but sadly, this isn't the case. I'm sure I'm not the only one who in recent years has started to feel like we're living in the communication equivalent of a Bangkok 7-Eleven, where words are spoken, but meaning is lost. But unlike a foreign exchange, where a word or a phrase becomes lost in translation, it's us as individuals who are finding ourselves lost in reinterpretation, an effort by some to rewrite the past and control our present. But why this effort? Author Spencer Clavin writes, concepts like democracy and liberty, if rightly used, command a reverence that arises naturally from their true meanings. Since totalitarians cannot produce such triumphs, they must ape them, using the cover of falsely redefined words to lend themselves an air of undeserved gravity. George Orwell would have agreed. In his 1946 essay, Politics and the English Language, he wrote, "Underneath this lies the half-conscious belief that language is a natural growth and not an instrument which we shape for our own purposes. Now it is clear that the decline of a language must ultimately have political and economic causes. It is not due simply to the bad influence of this or that individual writer." Or, as psychologist B.F. Skinner stated, going out of style isn't a natural process, but a manipulated change which destroys the beauty of last year's dress in order to make it worthless. But the manipulation of meaning isn't a method of control solely wielded by narcissist politicians and tyrants. It's also a method of control used by the enemy. But I repeat myself. Satan cannot create, he can only distort. And like other tyrants, the use of distortion is his means, destruction and power is his end. American novelist Nathaniel Hawthorne once said, "Words, so innocent and powerless as they are, as standing in a dictionary, how potent for good and evil they become in the hands of one who knows how to combine them." Which begs the questions. To whose combinations are we listening? To whose meanings are we following? Because the enemy, whether it be foreign, domestic, or spiritual, wants to confuse, manipulate, and destroy. And we must respond. But how? To combat efforts to confuse and distort, we must seek truth and we must speak truth. Both are necessary, because truth in a vacuum is simply silence disguised. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "In the end, we'll remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." So let us speak truthfully, and let us do so boldly, and let us use our words and do so precisely, because meaning is valuable, and words are anything but cheap. And at the end of the day, whether we find ourselves fighting for meaning in the sacred halls of democracy, or fighting to understand in the aisles of a mini-mart, this fact remains the same. It's not only about the word used, but how it's defined.